I never thought a security deposit could turn into a battle I'd remember for the rest of my life. But when Tasha Coleman moved into my apartment, I realized too late that this wasn't just a simple rental. It was a storm waiting to hit. My name is Akeem Johnson, and I've been a landlord in Atlanta for nearly a decade. I always prided myself on being fair. My tenants trusted me because I was reasonable. I repaired things quickly, listened to concerns, and never charged extra without explanation. But then came Tasha. She moved into my two-bedroom unit in mid-January. On paper, she looked perfect. Stable job, good references, and a clean rental history. I remember meeting her for the first time. She smiled, firm handshake, dressed impeccably, polite and articulate. Everything screamed ideal tenant. The first few weeks were smooth. Rent came on time. She maintained the apartment. I thought, maybe she's one of the good ones. But the first small red flags appeared almost immediately. It started with tiny complaints about the heating system. Nothing major, just, I think the thermostat isn't working right. When I went to check, everything was perfectly fine. I fixed the issue anyway, just to keep the peace. Then, she began reporting water usage irregularities. She'd send me texts late at night. Akeem, the water bill is too high this month. I think it's a leak. Can you check? I went to inspect. No leak. I sent photos, readings, and receipts. She replied vaguely, okay, I'll pay half for now. I'll check the rest later. By week 3, it became more obvious. I caught her adjusting the thermostat while I was out, raising the heat in winter and turning it off in rooms she wasn't using. At first, I chalked it up to forgetfulness, but the pattern repeated. Neighbors began sending me notes too, small things at first, complaints about odd smells from the apartment or the occasional loud music at 10 p.m. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I waited and documented everything. Every professional landlord knows documentation is your shield. I took photos, screenshots of texts, even kept a log of neighbor complaints. Little did I know, I was preparing for a battle that had only just begun. I started feeling something I hadn't experienced in years, frustration. Tasha was polite to my face, but seemed to be testing my patience, playing a subtle game. I asked myself, why would someone do this? She seems so normal. That's when it hit me, the betrayal. I had opened my property to someone I trusted, and in return, she was quietly bending the rules, pushing limits, and finding ways to manipulate a system. I realized that this wasn't going to be a simple rent issue. It was psychological warfare, and I had to respond smartly, legally, and strategically. By the end of the first month, I had already documented every text, every complaint, and every payment, installed discreet, legally compliant smart plugs in common areas to monitor energy use, begun quietly recording irregularities in the apartment. I didn't know it yet, but these first small steps would be the foundation of my ultimate revenge. Every document, every timestamp, every neighbor report would later become the evidence that would turn the tables completely. And as I watched Tasha settle in, I realized she had no idea the storm was already brewing. I thought the first month was a warning, a minor irritation. I was wrong. Things escalated faster than I could imagine. Tasha wasn't just careless. She was deliberately testing me, and I had to respond without crossing legal lines. By the second month, it became clear that Tasha had no intention of following the lease rules. It started subtly. I noticed spikes in the electricity bills despite the apartment being mostly empty during the day. Then came the water usage anomalies, shower running excessively at night, washing machines used multiple times per day, faucets left running in unoccupied rooms. I confronted her politely via text, attaching screenshots of usage and bills. Tasha, the usage this month is unusually high. Can you explain? Her response was casual, almost mocking. Oh, maybe it's a glitch? I'll try to watch it better next time. It wasn't a mistake. It was intentional manipulation, and I had proof. Then the neighbors got involved. Mrs. Patel from 2B complained. I hear water running at all hours and music blasting past midnight. It's impossible to sleep. I documented her testimony in writing, along with others who had noticed odd patterns. Here's the important part. This isn't just anecdotal. For landlords, legally documented neighbor complaints count when proving violations or justifying deductions from a security deposit. Tasha didn't know I was collecting this. She was so confident she could push boundaries without consequence. Things got worse. Tasha began messaging me late at night, claiming emergencies that didn't exist. The heater is broken again. I'm freezing. I can't use the water. Please fix it immediately or I won't pay rent. I scheduled inspections and found nothing wrong every single time. She was testing the limits, trying to scare me into giving concessions. I began narrating to myself. This isn't just about money, it's about control. Every screenshot of her manipulative texts became ammunition. I'll admit, I felt my blood pressure rise. Here I was, a landlord who had always prided himself on fairness, being pushed and bullied by a tenant who clearly thought she could get away with anything. By the end of the second month, I had a plan forming. I didn't want a petty fight. I wanted legal, undeniable justice. Every small document, every neighbor complaint, every suspicious usage log was now part of a mounting case that would eventually turn the tables. I wrote down the steps carefully. Continue documenting all incidents. Use legally compliant monitoring to capture deliberate sabotage. Prepare formal notices citing exact lease violations. One night, I received a text that would confirm her intentions in a way I hadn't expected. You're going to regret ever renting to me. Try and stop me. At that moment, I realized the game had fully begun. And I would win, but only if I stayed patient, clever, and strictly within the law. I realized the game had changed. Tasha wasn't just a difficult tenant, she was actively trying to manipulate me. But I had spent years preparing for moments like this. Now, it was time to turn every misstep she made into evidence, and every small violation into leverage. After the threatening text, I took a deep breath and reminded myself, patience is power. I couldn't act impulsively. Every landlord nightmare I'd ever heard about escalated when people tried to be too clever and broke the law. I decided on a strategic, fully legal approach. Carefully calculate all unpaid bills and lease violations. Collect indisputable proof for each claim. Formally notify her of consequences without breaking privacy or trespassing laws. I wanted the revenge to be satisfying but above board, a textbook case of karma delivered by diligence and legal. I pulled the electricity and water logs from the smart devices I had legally installed in common areas. The results were staggering. Electricity spiked during late nights when the apartment was supposedly empty. Water usage patterns that mirrored multiple simultaneous showers in a one-bedroom apartment. Tampered thermostat readings, aligning perfectly with complaints about heating. I printed every single screenshot, timestamped the logs, and filed them. This was the first undeniable evidence Tasha couldn't dispute, and I knew it would form the backbone of my case. Next, I approached the neighbors discreetly. I collected written statements about disturbances, late-night music, water running continuously, and odd smells from the apartment. Mrs. Patel's statement, I hear running water almost every night at 1 a.m. It's impossible to sleep. Mr. Lopez from 3C. The heating in her apartment goes from freezing cold to boiling hot in a matter of hours, even when she's not home. I combined these statements with screenshots of her texts claiming malfunctions that didn't exist. Every small reveal tightened the noose of accountability. I drafted a formal notice citing exact lease violations, unpaid utilities, tampering with property, disturbing neighbors. The notice was polite, professional, but firm. I outlined that her security deposit could legally be used to cover unpaid utilities and damages if not corrected immediately. Even after sending the notice, I didn't act impulsively. I let the tension simmer, knowing she would reveal herself through her own responses. Sure enough, the next morning, I got a text. Akeem, this is ridiculous. I'm not paying for things I didn't break. You'll see. I know my rights. Exactly what I needed. Her words proved she was aware of wrongdoing, but still believed she could push boundaries. This was my second micro-reveal. She had admitted awareness of lease violations, which strengthened my case. I had executed the first phase of my plan, gathered undeniable evidence, collected third-party corroboration, sent formal legal notices. I now have all the pieces to begin freezing her access to resources legally and reclaim control. I received a text from Tasha that night. "You think this scares me? You have no idea what I can do." The plan was simple, at least in theory. Let the evidence speak for itself, and let the law do the heavy lifting. What I didn't anticipate was just how quickly Tasha would push herself into a corner. By now, I had meticulously documented everything: utility logs, neighbor statements, tampered thermostat data, screenshots of manipulative texts, and formal notices. But documentation alone wasn't enough. I needed to create leverage without breaking any laws. In Georgia, landlords can withhold portions of the security deposit to cover unpaid rent or utilities, provided there's proper documentation. I calculated the exact amount Tasha owed for overdue utility payments, damages caused by tampering with appliances, cleaning fees for neglect. I drafted a detailed statement of account, breaking down every dollar, every overage, and every violation. Then, I formally notified her that her security deposit would be applied to these arrears. The twist: I worded the notice in a way that made it seem like her entire financial access was frozen until she addressed her obligations, without actually violating any laws. This was the first stage of my revenge, a psychological blow that forced her to feel the weight of her actions. The tension escalated quickly. I began sharing portions of the evidence in formal notices: screenshots of text messages where she admitted to tampering, meter readings showing abnormal usage, neighbor statements corroborating disturbances. Then came the subtle escalation. Tasha tried to manipulate the utility company directly, claiming the bills were fraudulent. I had anticipated this. I forwarded them the exact logs, legal lease clauses, and her own admissions. The utility company sided with me. Tasha's responses became frantic. "I can't believe you're doing this. You'll regret it. This isn't over." I didn't respond. Every message she sent only reinforced the evidence against her. Meanwhile, neighbors started commenting on her escalating frustration. One even said, "She keeps shouting about the bills. Something's definitely wrong in there." Tasha's financial control was psychologically frozen. The evidence was airtight and legally defensible, and her own actions had accelerated her downfall. Then, one night quite late, a text from Tasha hit my phone. "You think you've won? Wait until you see what I do next. This isn't over." I smiled, knowing the final phase was coming, where the full weight of her manipulations would be exposed. Karma would fully hit, and justice would prevail. By this point, it wasn't just about overdue bills or lease violations anymore. Tasha was unraveling in ways she never anticipated. Every small misstep she had made was now feeding a storm she couldn't escape. Tasha had always been confident, bold, and outspoken. But once the formal notices hit, and I had legally frozen her deposit, her behavior started to change in subtle but noticeable ways. She began shouting at neighbors, blaming everyone except herself. She posted vague threats online about unfair landlords, without realizing her posts were public and could be traced. Her calls to the utility company became frantic, pleading for leniency, and she inadvertently confirmed her own tampering. One particularly revealing moment came when she posted a story on social media claiming, "My landlord is harassing me. I can't believe this." What she didn't realize, the screenshots of her text admissions to tampering had already been archived. I quietly documented her posts, which would later serve as further proof of her manipulation. I sent another formal notice, detailing unpaid utility charges, documenting her repeated lease violations, explaining that failure to resolve these issues could result in deductions from the security deposit and legal action. This wasn't intimidation. It was the law working exactly as it should. I framed everything clearly, citing exact lease clauses, meter readings, and neighbor statements. Tasha's messages grew increasingly desperate. "You can't do this to me. This is illegal." I didn't respond. Silence was part of the strategy. Every panicked text she sent was another piece of evidence, proving her awareness and guilt. Meanwhile, neighbors were noticing. Water running at odd hours had stopped. Music blaring late at night had ceased, and the apartment seemed strangely quiet. Karma had begun its visible work. So far, Tasha had started publicly panicking, exposed her own manipulations on social media, and lost control of her finances due to the legally frozen deposit. But she was still fighting back, vowing revenge. I received another text from her. "You think this is over? I'm not done yet. You'll see." I had waited, documented, and executed every step carefully. By now, Tasha's threats had lost their power, and the law and my preparation was ready to deliver what she had long avoided: accountability. I sent what I called the final statement of account, a legally compliant, meticulously documented notice. It included all unpaid utilities, charges for tampering and damages, cleaning and restoration costs, documentation of all neighbor complaints, screenshots of her own admissions via text. The message was professional, firm, and undeniable. Almost immediately, the effect was visible. Tasha's social media posts turned frantic, revealing her fear and desperation. She tried to portray herself as the victim, but I had already archived and documented everything, including timestamps and prior admissions. She contacted neighbors, claiming harassment, but the neighbors confirmed she had caused the disturbances herself. The utility company refused further leniency since she had been repeatedly warned and her account was accurately billed. Tasha texted me again. "You think you've won? You'll regret this." I didn't respond. Instead, I calmly followed legal protocol, withholding the amount legally allowed from her security deposit to cover the arrears. I could see her unravel psychologically. Texts became increasingly frantic. She tried calling neighbors. She posted desperate social media messages. Every move was another piece of evidence reinforcing my strategy. Finally, after all the formalities, Tasha moved out. The apartment was left intact. No further tampering or disruptions, but she had lost financial control. And the security deposit covered all unpaid charges and damages. For me, the payoff wasn't revenge in a petty sense. It was justice delivered efficiently and legally. Every warning ignored, every lease violation, and every manipulation was accounted for. I often reflect on that experience. Tasha taught me something important. Some tenants will push boundaries, manipulate, and test your patience. But with documentation, legal knowledge, and careful strategy, you can deliver karma without crossing ethical or legal lines. The final text from her: "You may have won this time, but don't think I'm done." I smiled. For the first time, I felt complete closure. Justice wasn't about anger. It was about being prepared, staying calm, and letting the system work in your favor.
Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this, go watch the one of the left and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel for more tales of triumph over injustice and a saga of ultimate revenge.